All good, thank you, hello. Wow, Masterclass, that's a rather lofty title. I hope we can fulfill all of your expectations behind that. I am very delighted to be here. Sjoerd, have you been at HTNG before?
No, this is the first HTNG.
Welcome, fantastic. So I'm delighted to have Sjoerd Brouwer join us from Mandarin Oriental. Obviously, Laurie has already given her. Would you like to introduce yourself again?
Yeah, no, I'm good.
I think everyone knows you. I'm David Cabreza. Well, as you can see, no, it's come off the screen.
No,
anyway,
you're still there.
I work with XanderPay. Payments is something I've been really interested in for years, but my background is hotels. And I think that intersection of payments and hotels is a fantastic opportunity. I think the hotel groups kind of lag behind some of the other industries. There's great opportunity. I would love to hear about what is happening with our kind of sister organization, HTNG, AHLA, who have been focused on trying to uncover, where is the industry going with this? Where do we want to be going? So, Sjoerd, can you tell us a little bit about your involvement in that?
Yeah, and so very exciting that we all of a sudden got invited to a nice call, Laurie on that, but then really a broad set of people. Hoteliers, from PSPs, everyone was there coming together and looking at payments and thinking like, this could be something great. This could not always be this repeating story of like, oh, we're lagging behind. No, this could be great, and we have to set this kind of North Star for 2030, hopefully a little bit earlier, and work towards that. And you roll up the sleeves and do that as a community together, and not having just hoteliers banging around and say like, oh, how hard can it be? And then saying, PSP saying, well, yes, it can be very hard, but let's work together. And all right.
Laurie, no, Worldline is involved in this as well.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about what you guys are trying to achieve with this and what work has been done so far?
Yeah, I would say that, so this is an evolution of where HTNG started several years ago with the working groups, and we had a goal at that point in time was fax-free by 2020.
Did we get that?
Did we get that?
Maybe.
A little bit, maybe. And the evolution beyond that was that, we did publish the Open Payment Alliance specification. We felt like we had achieved several things that helped move things forward in terms of if you were to do something, what is that framework for how you would do it? And all that publication went through the partner with HTNG, which again now has evolved into this community of interest. And as a community of interest in payments, kind of broadened the group and who's included in that so that we can figure out, by 2030, I think the way this was put as well was if your CFO came to you with your CEO and they both looked you square in the eye and they said, you have all the money you need, can I have this next year? Would you really turn them down? I mean, what is the hurdle between, as a technology, is technology the hurdle? Is it really something else that's the hurdle? But this group was really kind of set forth to figure out what are those hurdles so that by 2030, the guests can just not even think about a payment. They just walk into the hotel and enjoy the experience.
That was going to be one of my questions. Why 2030? If we look at COVID and the incredible compression of adoption cycles with things like contactless, the world has moved very quickly in accepting new payment methods and using new payment methods. We're looking at 6 years out. I know we've been talking about this within the hotel industry for a while.
Because next year wasn't an option? It was an even number?
I know that there are some hurdles, and in fact, all the hoteliers in the room will probably throw them up and cite merchant of record issues and a geographic spread of properties, et cetera. Putting that to the side, think about the vision of what this will look like. Sure. What does it look like from a consumer perspective what might it look like?
I mean, in a way, we have to go 100 years back. Because, those were the brilliant days where, you would sit in the hotel, people would know you, and you just put it on a tap. So there were no payments involved. And then all of a sudden we got to that age of signing every single check and, playing quartet with your credit cards at the reception desk. And that is something that we want to go back to, like paymentless experience. And recently, actually, in a smaller luxury hotel, ultra luxury, really good, one of our guests who I had a chat with, he came back and he said he was raving for 10 minutes, not about the luxury facilities or whatever, only about payments. He said, I never signed anything. And it felt great. I felt at home. And that is the vision in the end that we want to go towards. And it's for us, at least at Mandarin Oriental, really payments without actually paying.
I think there's something very good about being able to take the payment piece of the experience out, because people, as was said earlier today, that's not what you're looking forward to. You're looking forward to the enjoyment, the stay. And I see how that resonates very clearly with a luxury group. What about other sectors in the market, like mid-scale or economy? Because I see other brands that are taking the front desk out entirely. I think, for example, it's Premier Inn in the UK that doesn't want a front office, front desk. You check in with your card that you've already prepaid, and you move on. So this could apply, would you say, to all segments?
Well, you're not talking about self-service on some level, and to what degree does the hotelier decide what are the touch points that are important to you?
Well, and exactly, and then also leave, because sometimes also as hoteliers we always think what is right. We don't. We should leave that to the guest in the end and give them the options, and also actually based on preferences. For example, we have quite a powerful CDP with a lot of information on there. We in general have so much information where we can anticipate the ideal flow in terms of payments, so to make sure also that the payment process is definitely not static, but something that could really mold towards who the guest is and that particular stay. So that's, again, ideal 2030.
So I guess what I'm hearing is it's a little bit about options, enabling guests to choose how they wish to interact.
Exactly, options, and also then steering in the right direction based on what we already know about the guest and a particular stay.
It reminds me a little bit of a case study I did as an MBA student years ago about Barclays and when they were first installing ATMs. And people were saying, why would you do that? People want to go in and see a friendly face when they're getting their money out of a bank. And now I don't think anybody in their right mind would think, I'd rather wait in this queue to get my money instead of just going to the ATM. Would you see the same type of thing at the front desk potentially, where people think, I don't need someone to greet me, I just want to go to my room?
Well, but there's also, I think, part of what the digital age is done for any part of the industry. I mean, you can look at it across the board, but there are certain regions in the world where a digital identity, if there's some regulatory reason why you have to know who's in the room, or you have to know who crossed the threshold, just crossing a border, right? I mean, we talked about this as well, that, in the US, we've had this process of, you can register for, pre-clearance of some level. There's different levels of it now as well, but there is kind of the, the eye check-in where you can just go stare at something and it goes, oh, there you go, let me see your boarding pass, and away you go. So how well does that evolve globally into a way that, it's not necessarily the payment that slows you down, but maybe it was the regulatory compliance thing that slows all of this down?
And I think also that there we have to really look at this as the full flow of check-in, because even if we figure out payments and the guest will then be stuck indeed in identity checks, or even if the digital keys are still a little bit wonky, then we really have to solve that whole flow. Let's start with payments, but then also work with the different partners that we have on the different parts of that journey.
So now, from Mandarin's perspective, I'm interested in this because I was talking to another hotel company, super luxury. I mean, really luxury, where they had all types of payments. People who, like Saudi princes who wanted to pay in cash, and then they had other people who wanted to pay in Bitcoin, and they've got heads of state, and like all types. How do you manage that kind of variety of guests and requirements? And this is a fairly tiny chain.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting one, because there you need to be ready for all kind of scenarios. I think that's in general in luxury hospitality, be ready for whatever may happen. But then also let's focus at really solving for the 90% of cases. Of course, we can handle that 10%, but then you see a lot of commonalities between this 90% of our guests and the payment methods that they prefer. So I think in terms of focus, that's not necessarily the issue, but then solving actually what our guests are expecting, because in the end, guess they're used to the Uber kind of experience. For example, if I came now from the airport, I definitely didn't jump into an Uber because I love Skoda Fabia. So I would much rather actually go for a cab that is waiting right in front of me. But it's easy. It is a very easy payment experience, and that's also what our guests are expecting, and we should start delivering.
Well, and I think the other discussion we had already was kind of along the lines of if there's technology available to remove friction, then how is that to that point about, well, if the CFO showed up with a blank check, so you could just do whatever you needed to do to create that experience or that seamless process, what technology would you then take advantage of, or what regions of the world? And that, part of the people in the call said, well, I guess you could, just focus on your loyalty, your customer base being your loyal, and you just store it in their profile. And it's like, well, that may not be applicable to all brands, or how they want to deliver maybe is across the board, that they really don't want this to be about, you're one of my special people.
And it's also a little bit, it makes me think of Wi-Fi. Indeed, you have to have spent like 20K per year, and then you get free Wi-Fi. And I think that's definitely something that would not go down well with our guests. So at least from our side, also from a Fans of MO perspective, once you become a fan, no need to prove your loyalty. This is a bare minimum of the experience we want to deliver.
Yeah, and I go back to some of the statistics that we heard earlier about, the new generation, by next year, half the world will be made up of millennials and Gen Zs. And so they grew up with the internet. So, they're not necessarily going to be loyalists. They're going to be more price sensitive, more interested in the sustainable experiences that we saw. And how, if you really then can't truly embed information about them to deliver on an experience, what does that change about your thinking? I think this is why I like this community of interest, because it has such a broad set of brands and ideas. And I think, again, from a technology perspective, you can throw a lot at the wall. AI is another one you can throw at the wall and see how that helps.
So yeah, thinking about the AHLA study, and I know that the results and everything is going to be published in the autumn or sometime around then. Are there any insights that you have gained that you haven't already mentioned that you think would be relevant particularly? Because I know it covered travel. It wasn't just hotels. Yeah. But for the hotel sector in particular, any insights that we should be taking from other industries? Like Sjoerd just mentioned, you're looking at Uber and their payments. And I know we've talked about in the past Amazon and their payments, and how they've taken that out. Anything that you would say stands out from that?
What I really like is the retail industry and how they use tokens from your spend, and then starting to build a profile around you. We're looking at something similar that, for example, many of our guests, they, for example, if you're living in Hong Kong, they go in and out of our property there, go to the spa, go spend a nice lunch, but not necessarily making a booking. So that is a part of the profile we completely lose. But if you're linking the token of their card to their profile, then all of a sudden you get so much better insight into our guest. So that's something from the retail industry would really be keen on implementing. The only challenge there is then being all around the globe, finding one payment service provider that could cover the full portfolio for us.
I think that's where technology and partnerships have really evolved over the last 5 years or so. You're now able to accomplish that kind of global coverage, which I think is important, especially for the large chains in the room, where you're trying to make sure that your global guests and your global portfolio all kind of work together, regardless of the payment type.
Still some frontiers to cover, but we're getting there. We're getting there for sure.
Well, customer behavior has always been a fascinating subject, right? In terms of how you identify the guest, how you treat the guest, how you know their preferences so you know what to have ready for them. I mean, Focusrite did a study recently that Worldline, MasterCard, PayPal, and UATP sponsored, but we used HTNG and AHLA as partners to help identify the right people in the industry to answer the survey and to give us those insights that we're looking for. And I will tell you, out of 170 pages, I have not read them all. It is still a lot of data, and by this fall, we hope to have that in a more consumable way of publishing. But a lot of the similarities across airlines and hoteliers, you do see in the data where they all feel very much the same around the difficulty of making certain payments work in certain channels. That, you know, cards are cards. Everybody knows that 16 digits are 16 digits. And I think most every system in the world knows what to do with 16 digits. Now, regulatory reasons have made that even a bit difficult, even in this region, right? But basically, that's the part that everybody says, oh, yeah, I got that. But the questions around, well, when will you do some of these other things? You know, wallets, you can even consider Apple Pay a wallet. I mean, you can, right, consider that. Implementing those things are focuses for most of these, across both sides. And how and when, they're all like looking sooner rather than later at some of that. But it is also kind of a regional thing that typical. The US goes, what? 16 digits, I've been using them. I still don't understand the chip 3DS thing. But the other regions, like the Asia regions, are much more sensitive to non-card-like payment choices, right? So it really does match with what we've seen today in these other surveys, that, you know, there is some regional reasons for doing something a little differently than others, and maybe that's also some of the behavior too, that if you're trying to deliver and reach a demographic that is evolving, they're growing up as we speak. How are you doing that? How are you delivering on that?
There's definitely complexity in all this. You touched upon, I think, a really important point when looking at the different distribution channels and the way that the customer actually books before they arrive at the property, and how that payment might flow with them. So, of course, if they are on a hotel website and paying directly, it's a little easier. How do you manage that? And what are some of the complexities that you see in making this kind of seamless check-in process and check-out process happen if it's been booked through an intermediary?
Yeah, I just want to, I don't want to say that OTAs have it easy. I'm not even saying that there are 400 people apparently working on payments. But for us, if you think about it, that we have a payment service provider that does e-com, and in general, e-commerce is you know, there's broader coverage of payment service providers, et cetera, et cetera. But then we want to tie that into the full guest experience. So you will also have card-present transactions. You want to have your PDQs then involved. You want to create a full ecosystem that works online, but then also offline on property to enable the vision that we have. And I think that there is a very different challenge that we're trying to solve, and that hopefully also through the community that we're creating are able to bring these worlds a little bit closer together, that we can achieve goals on both sides of the coin.
Yeah, and I do think, but that is, you know, kind of the frenemy question too, that, you know, there are reasons where, whether it was sold in a different channel other than your direct channel, how the data can flow through to the property so that you can deliver what you can deliver at the property. At least you have better insights into how the customer shopped, or maybe some of that behavior of their demographic that helps you at the property go, oh, well, you may have to pay me a little different, but at least I know the spa is important to you. Or at least it is to me, I don't know, for some reason.
I know this was covered a little bit in the previous conversations with the myth busting, but where you have a guest who's booking through an intermediary and prepaying for that, but then they still have, you know, their own charges, incidentals, whatever, at the hotel. How do we make that more seamless so that they are not having to see that they've got different payments going to different partners and not having to re-enter, you know, provide a second card or whatever at the time that they check in? Is there any way to manage that, or is that always going to be a problem that we're never going to be able to solve?
Well, problems are only opportunities, right? But I do think there's, you know, on some level, I think you know that they're two different things, that you know you paid one for something, and as long as that something is delivered at the property, you're going to be okay maybe with paying a little differently for anything that you're going to supplement on site. But perception, how do you jointly deliver on an experience that says from end to end, it went so well that I would certainly do that again?
And then ideally, if you would have, for example, so let's say you booked indeed in that flow, and then you arrive on property, and we're finally actually having the data to identify you, and I say, voila, we find you in the CDP, and then afterwards we would, in the future, have all your details on file to create this beautiful experience on property, where you would never have to wave around with your card, and even not on checkout at whatever point. So yeah, Laurie, I think I agree. Probably they will remain separate worlds, and guests are possibly okay with it, as long as we then on property deliver on recognizing them for who they are. Because even beyond this topic, you see that very often that in the end, one of the things that we teach our colleagues over and over again is that guests should never repeat themselves, never. And we see that happening day in, day out, because you always have to show your card again and again and again and again. And that is something that we, of course, should step away from.
Now, Laurie, I think you touched on this a little bit earlier, was some of the implications of regulatory, whether it's...
Yeah, some of that, it's certainly the world that I live in. Unfortunately, I wake up on Monday mornings and talk to compliance. It does make me sweat sometimes, but I think we can't avoid it, that there are reasons why there's always probably going to be, multiple partners in this world, because we're not all going to be able to do everything perfectly in every region of the world, because it is such a moving target. I mean, wallets in general, payment methods in general, political situations sometimes change what or how things work, and sometimes you have to just turn them off because you can't repatriate the money anymore. So there's always these challenges to payments that require communication. I think honestly, at the end of the day, and to the degree that our community of interest is talking, opening up those lines of communication. We don't have to talk about the secret sauce, but we do have to talk. And I don't think you can get away from that.
I think you've hit the nail on the head, and this is where the communication and collaboration across partners and companies and associations becomes really, really important. I'm recalling a couple years ago, well, more than a couple years ago, in the UK with the rollout of PSD2 and this need for a second authentication factor. This was opened up to the industry generally, like not just the hotel industry, but everyone, for comments. And no one from the hotel industry commented saying this doesn't work for us with no-shows.
Yeah.
But they didn't, we didn't even know really to engage at that point. Yeah. And so then it became law, and it's like, well, how do you charge for a no-show when you don't have that?
We don't have the data.
That pin. And so you
don't have the CVV.
Trying to play catch up.
How many years did we talk about CVV?
Exactly. Playing catch up with a law that wasn't written for your industry. And so I think this kind of conversation and having this community of interest and having that engagement and people understanding what are the issues at a brand level, at a corporate level, becomes really important, because no one at the property level even would have even been aware of what's happening from a regulatory perspective.
Yeah. And sometimes it's just validating to know you're all fishing in the same pond. I can generally list the top 5 problem children countries that somebody will ask me about. And you're like, well, yeah, that's tough.
Yeah.
There are some solutions that solve for some of that and others that will not. But yeah, it is very validating if at a minimum you can at least communicate that, oh yeah, we have that problem too. Oh, great. But, if you thought you were the only person or the only company, or that it was just about the fact that you're just now waking up to something that happened.
Yeah. Okay, so one thing I want to look at as well from this perspective of 2030. We've been talking a lot about the guest experience, because that's really kind of the focus right now. The next session, we'll be talking about what are the challenges to making that happen and what are the solutions that are in place. We haven't at all really touched upon what does that mean for the hotel property, to make this happen, or what are the benefits, right? Surely there are some benefits, not just to the guest, but to some operational efficiency or cost reduction or revenue potential. What types of things are you seeing as benefits in this overall experience?
I mean, I would nearly say all of the above. Absolutely. One of the things that we're very excited about is by creating a more seamless experience for our guests, it nearly automatically also becomes it for the colleagues. And from my last position was a hotel manager in Lucerne, and I had colleagues coming to me and said, like, I don't want to be an accountant. I want to be with the guest. That's what I love. That's why I'm a guest experience agent. And that is something that is really driving also me to, let's sort this out, because we want to have colleagues, curating experiences for our guests and being there with them and not being glued to a screen. And you can also not hire for that. You cannot hire a colleague that is lovely and bubbly and outgoing and at the same time be this very, harsh and rough accountant. So that is something that I would actually see in retention of our colleagues and attraction to a brand to work for, actually has a very good impact.
Mm-hmm. So in the next section, we're going to have representatives from various payment companies. I really want to get your perspective from a hotelier on this now. In order to make that happen, to raise these payment issues above property and do it at a brand level, so many of the chains are still struggling to get a head of payments. There's one meeting that I had where we were looking for to implement something with the chain, and I love this guy. He said, I'm going to bring some other people into the discussion because I can't do this on my own. And so I joined the Zoom call, and there's like 12 people. He brought in his finance team and his distribution team and his legal team and his marketing team and his ops team. And it's like, they all need to be part of this discussion. And I think, yes, they do. And especially if you don't have someone who's managing payments centrally. But, if we're looking at doing this in 6 years, 5+ years, how do we do that if we don't? Well, how do we do it?
How do we do that? I think first of all, we're a very small group, and I think there's a lot of hotel groups who will not have the skill to have this dedicated head of payments. But we have great partners. They're wonderful payment service providers that have a lot of industry knowledge, also knowing how hotels work. And I think that is something how we can solve it. But we bring our know-how of operations, but also when you see how payment service providers are evolving in a way that goes beyond the very technical nitty-gritty towards actually understanding the flows within hotels and the pain points that are there. Together we can definitely solve that. And we are very lucky with these partners.
I think also because of size, you're probably a bit more nimble maybe than some of the really big chains, which have very diverse ownership groups and all of the rest. I mean, they might have more resources than you do, but there's probably a bit of a balance there. Do you see anyone racing to that finish line at 2030 ahead of the pack?
Yes, I do. Definitely not us, unfortunately, because of the global coverage that we have. We are originally coming from Asia, with a large footprint in China, being a very tough market, of course. But you have some smaller, very nimble hotel groups that are focused on EMEA and US. And if you're focused on that market, I think then you have a very bright future ahead of you.
Fantastic.
I think you just throw AI at it.
Yeah, true.
Sorry, you just do what?
Throw a little AI at
Oh, right.
I forgot to mention that word, these two letters. My God.
it. Data.
Yeah, true.
And we are actually done to the very second. So I'd like to thank you very much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate the discussion for help setting that vision of where we should be. I think the next session, we'll be talking about how we might get there. But,
Make it
Sjoerd, thank
happen.
you. Laurie, thank you.